Hi guys, and welcome to the video. So I just got done watching Strange New Worlds Season 1, Episode 3. As usual, I will give you a breakdown of the episode, so spoilers coming up, and I'll give you my thoughts along the way, and then when we're finished, I'll give you my final thoughts on the episode. First, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has subscribed to the channel. If you're new here and you like what you see, then please hit that subscribe button and give the video a like. Episode opens on an ion storm hovering over a planet. This is the former homeworld of the Illyrians, I believe a brand new species. These Illyrians were using genetic engineering to improve their species. So they couldn't gain access to the Federation and they were wiped out. The Enterprise is collecting records of them and investigating the planet in general. It's established that Starfleet has banned genetic engineering of any kind and has outlawed it completely. And this species couldn't join the Federation, even though they wanted to join the Federation. They couldn't because of the stigma attached to genetic engineering. And obviously, I believe this show's going in a very Khan augment direction. I don't think it's a very good place to go. I believe it's been well covered. I wanted it to go somewhere new, and it's not really done that. I believe this is where the show is starting to slip up. Starfleet has outlawed genetic engineering and genetic modifications of any kind. But if we remember the first episode, Nurse Chapel's all excited because she gets to mess with the crew's genome on an away mission so they can look like another species. That's genetic engineering. You cannot have a rule in place and break it. They have... It's a rule of Starfleet. You don't mess with, you don't do any genetic engineering whatsoever. It's outlawed. It's a rule. It's a Federation law. It's Starfleet's rule. But the crew can just break it because it's okay when they need to do it. They just do it. But this entire species was banned from joining the Federation simply because they use genetic engineering to advance their species. And this iron storm's coming in, and Pike and the crew try to beam back. We get a little put my teeth in. We get a little scene with them trying to beam back to the Enterprise. Hemmer is a genius, apparently, because everyone's like a super genius. I suppose you'd have to be in Starfleet, so that's fine. He's amazing, he's awesome, and he draws power from the rest of the ship, reserve power, to boost the transporters to try and get everyone back on the Enterprise because the ion storm's moving in. They manage to get all but two of the crew, and it's Pike and Spock that are left on the surface. Pike and Spock make it to the rendezvous point and they can't beam them up, so Pike and Spock have to take shelter. Cuts to credits. I still like those credits. This episode is directed by Leslie Hope. I remember Leslie Hope mostly from 24 season 1. A reasonable director. This episode, the direction wasn't too bad. It's more the story elements that I have a problem with, and I'll get to that at the end of my video. So number one has to assume command of the Enterprise, something that she has done before, and there's a whole big deal about her having to take over the bridge of the Enterprise. Pike and Spock are stuck on the surface, and we have Ortegas walking down a corridor, and she happens to come across one of the landing party, and he's acting a little strange in Strange New Worlds. He's trying to get as close to the light as possible that he is standing next to, and he headbutts this light. And she restrains him and calls security. We cut to number one in her quarters, and she is also acting very peculiar. Seems to have a mild attraction to light. She goes to rip off her uniform because I believe she's getting a little hot under her collar. She begins to glow, radiate some kind of heat, I imagine, and she's all confused and she's wondering what the hell's going on. We cut to sickbay. Number one decides to lie about her having been affected by whatever is happening to the rest of the landing party. She says, oh no, I'm not experiencing any kind of side effects at all. She lied. And we find out later why, and I'll get to that in a little while. It's discovered that everyone's suffering from a virus, including number one, but the other crew members don't know that. So number one goes to engineering and tries to figure out with Hemmer, again, really blunt and quite unnecessarily insulting at times. He kind of reminds me of Tarka from Discovery, Mr. Fantastic, Mr. Awesome, Mr. Amazeballs. He's absolutely brilliant, he's a genius, and He says that the biofilters scrub out anything that they don't recognize. Number one is like, well, we need to run a power diagnostic, and he's all like, I will be happy to do so. Thanks a bunch, my superior officer. Thanks a bunch. I'm going to be up all night because of this. Thanks. She goes back to the bridge and gets in touch with Pike on the surface. Momentarily, she informs Pike that there's been an outbreak. It cuts to number one in the observation lounge. I believe it's the observation lounge. And our favourite belter walks in, the Noonian drummer. And they're having a conversation about her ancestry. And yes, her ancestor was Noonian Singh. I have a feeling they're going to go towards the whole eugenics wars and Khan thing, even though it's been done before and it's been done better. I'm starting to see some real issues here. They're having a conversation, and the drummer, she starts to glow as well, and she's taken to sickbay. They realise it's contagious, and number one puts the ship into a lockdown. I think it's still a little raw, perhaps you shouldn't do it, but yeah, she puts the Enterprise into lockdown. Cuts to Pike and Spock on the planet. Spock is reading the records that the Illyrians left behind, and they're watching this storm come towards them. There's these really strange wisps of light, and they don't know what the hell it is. It cuts to Uhura on the Enterprise. She's in a bunk. So this virus, this thing that's affected the Enterprise, it makes people extremely attracted to light, as I said earlier in the video. So these two bunkmates of Uhura's have a holographic representation of a sun. So they're basking in the holographic sunlight. She wakes up, turns off the hologram. They get really annoyed, like raging annoyed. Before we see any kind of altercation, it literally cuts to the medical bay. Hemmer walks in and says, hey ho, I'm a genius, I need to look at the sickbay systems, because the plot will need me to have done that much later in the episode. Hemmer turns the lights off, and Benga starts acting a little ragey and gets a little annoyed. Hemmer walks out just going, yeah, I'm a genius. And Benga turns the lights on, everybody's resting easy, and Benga's sort of relieved, and we don't know why, but we'll find out why later in the episode. Cuts down to Pike on the surface. These things, these light wisps or plasma beings or whatever they are, try bursting through the door. And they manage to seal the door. Spock gets injured on the neck slightly. No big deal. It's not really covered again in the episode. It cuts back to number one and Uhura. It turns out Uhura's okay. She's not affected by this light virus at all. Number one is trying to figure out how she wasn't affected, even though her two bunkmates were affected. So she basically does what Uhura did and figures out that it's light transferred virus. The virus is transferred via light. So they decide to shut all the lights off on the ship. Number one's looking through the records that they have on the Illyrian planet. There's a problem in the transporter room. So she goes down to the transporter room. There's Hemmer beaming a piece of the planet's core onto the transporter pad. He tries to complete the transport, and she shoots him, stuns him, and disengages the transporter. Then she carries out Hemmer, unconscious Hemmer. We have the return of the slow power walk. You know, the Discovery power walk. She power walks, carrying Hemmer to sickbay. I mean, which is fine. You know, you get some strong females that can lift blokes up. We've all seen the She-Hulk trailer, have we not? Oh god, that looks so stupid. Cuts down to the planet, and Spock and Pike are fighting off these entities, or at least they know that the entities are going to burst through. And Spock says something along the lines of, the wisps of energy appeared as the colonists disappeared. And the logic centers of my brain, yes, they do exist, said, well, that makes perfect sense then, doesn't it? Because the colonists are clearly the wisps of light. They are those disembodied spirit creature things, whatever they are. But it takes Pike the rest of the episode to actually get there. The atmospheric pressure's increasing. The Pike and Spock seem to be in complete peril, but it's a prequel, so we know they're not in peril. We know that they survive, and there's absolutely no stakes for them or any of the other characters that we know appear later in Trek. And this is a problem with prequels. No one's in actual peril. We know they survive. The only way they're in peril is if the writers decide this is going to be an alternate timeline. Maybe it is already an alternate timeline. Who knows anymore? Pike and Spock know that they can't survive the atmospheric pressure. The window starts to break. The wisps make it through. Pike orders Spock to the ground. The wisps of energy create a shield around them to protect them from the atmospheric pressure from the ion storm. They survive, which is, genuinely unexpected. Now, it's revealed that number one has lied on a Starfleet entry paperwork, that she's actually an Illyrian. So she's a genetically modified human being serving in Starfleet. Now, this has been covered in DS9 with Dr. Bashir. He was very nearly cashiered out the service, but Starfleet took it very seriously. And they say Starfleet takes genetic engineering seriously, but in the first episode, they broke that rule. So what the fuck do rules matter anymore? Seriously. I'm trying not to swear in my videos, but what the fuck do rules matter in your own universe if you're not going to bloody follow them? You've made a whole point about Starfleet banning genetic engineering, and in the first episode you just do it because you don't have a consistent team of writers who actually know what the writers from the previous freaking episode write. Jesus Christ! Number one's now an Illyrian. It wasn't revealed what the original number one species, what her species was. She appeared human, so we must have assumed she was human. She wasn't named in the original pilot. We never really knew her name. I believe her name was Leigh Hudek. They changed it in New Trek and it's Una. But she's an Illyrian, and that's why she hasn't been affected by any of the changes. She asks M'Benga if they can create a cure for it based on her blood work. M'Benga says no, because the antibodies have already dissipated or something along those lines. M'Benga wants to be put out cold because he says, I can't help with this situation because, I'm a doctor. What use am I as a doctor to try and help in this outbreak of this virus? It just put me to sleep because I'm a doctor. I'm not valuable at the minute, and I could turn any minute and get, violent and addicted to light. So when M'Benga says, yeah, I'm the doctor, you better put me out because I'm no good in a medical emergency. Number one's reluctant, but she does it anyway. We'd seen just a few moments before, La'an Noonien drummer gotten up. She bolted upright. Number one gets a computer call, I believe, about the warp core. Warp core's destabilizing because someone's lowering the force field. She turns around and Chapel's on the floor unconscious. La'an Noonien drummer, she's gone to the warp core. So number one goes to engineering and they have a fist fight. A lot of headbutting, a lot of martial arts. Number one pins drummer to the ground and says, come on, I don't want to do this. Drummer says, goddamn hypocrite. I have been an augment. People have judged me for being an augment. And it turns out you are a hypocrite because you are a damn augment. Anyway, number one punches her straight in the face, knocks her out. And number one absorbs radiation from the warp core that should have breached by now. But it didn't breach. She needs to get that hit of radiation. Cuts back to the planet's surface and Pike is trying to get through to the Enterprise. And Spock spells it out for Pike, saying these people are disembodied. He gives them two options that it could be, but the spirits are disembodied Illyrians. And they were changed. They ran into the storm because they caught this light virus, virus that makes people attracted to light. So they ran towards the lightning, got disembodied, and are now part of the storm. I was thinking, how many elements of different Star Trek episodes could you mash together? Let's use an element from this episode. Let's use an element from that episode, and let's get all these little plot points from all the different episodes and try and mesh them together in a mess of plot spaghetti. Pike and Spock walk out and they're like, these people tried to reverse the genetic engineering and in doing so destroyed themselves because they wanted to join the Federation. It cuts back to the Enterprise and number one wakes M'Benga up and says everything's fine because La'an Noonien Soong isn't Illyrian. Illyrian. I'm Illyrian. I absorbed the radiation. She absorbed the radiation, and that cured the light disease thing. And Nurse Chapel cured the light virus thing because, you know, she's really good at her job. Fuck me. Hey, it's all been solved and solved really easily. And there's no explanation needed. It's just, yeah, they got absorbed by some radiation, and then she bounced off of some swamp gas refracted off of Venus, and somehow, you like that reference, somehow everything's fine. Anyway, the virus is history. So it cuts to number one and La'an, which at one point in this episode, number one referred to her as just La'an. To me, she's still drummer. And no, I'm not going to lay off. She is drummer. They just took a character from another show and said, let's do that. Let's make a really obnoxious character based on this pretty epic character from another show. She's drummer. She's discount drummer. She is discount drummer. They have this conversation about her being a descendant of Khan. She's kind of angry, but she's not angry. They just have a conversation, and they make up, and they're friends again. And they say, oh, you know, I like strawberries. You like strawberries too. Number one goes to Pike and says, Captain, I deserve to be cashiered out of Starfleet. She does exactly what Bashir does in DS9. It's Dr. Bashir, I presume. And she resigns her commission and says, I lied to Starfleet. I'm an Illyrian, and I shouldn't have been allowed in Starfleet at all. I have broken a dozen Federation and Starfleet rules. Sack me. And Pike says, no, I'm not going to sack you. You're an exemplary officer. You stay in Starfleet. You let me deal with Starfleet. It's like, I know it's a slightly more cavalier time with things of rules and regulations because Starfleet's still pretty young. The story's got to make sense. She lied and she violated rules, and she's just allowed to get away with it because, you know, people make mistakes. Bashir got away with it, but he didn't really get away with it because his dad accepted a prison sentence because he broke the damn law. And he did that so Bashir could keep his commission. But never mind, it seems to be all over the freaking place. Anyway, so number one goes to see Dr. Mbenga, and there was a problem that when they couldn't draw enough power from the transporters, Hemmer, the genius, Anar guy, discovered that Mbenga's been using the medical transporter. Still don't understand why they go have a medical transporter, but okay, medical transporter to keep a pattern in the buffer. And he admits, yes, I kept the pattern in the buffer. It's my sick and dying child. She's been kept in this transporter buffer. Now, I could go on and on and on and on about how ridiculous that is. But, I mean, people will throw relics at me. Scotty survived for 80 years inside a transporter buffer because he was a freaking genius engineer. A bit like Hemmer, apparently. Now, Scotty survived because he cycled the power to create a regenerative cycle of energy. So his pattern remains stable. So it looks like Mbenga's done pretty much the same thing. And the reason he was put out earlier is because he's not really a doctor. He's an engineer who's just pretending to be a doctor, clearly. He's been keeping his daughter in the transporter buffer for a while now, and he's hidden it from the rest of the crew. He's been drawing on the ship's power. He should be, again, charged, released from Starfleet because he put the lives of everyone on the ship in jeopardy from the light virus that just makes people really like the light. And number one says, yeah, you're not leaving Starfleet because, you know, I'm gonna make sure you get the power to your transporter buffer to care for your daughter. And the reason Mbenga's kept his daughter in the transporter buffer is obviously her disease is terminal, and he hopes it one day to find a cure. And he says, you know, we can travel light years in hours. There has to be a cure out there somewhere. And I thought, well, that's quite an interesting subplot, I suppose. But it's the way it's introduced and the way it's, you know, everybody just seems to get away with breaking the rules. You know, Starfleet officers in the other Star Trek shows, you know, the actual decent ones, broke the rules and they were punished. They suffered consequences. Number one records a personal log where she says, you know, the Illyrians when will we ever be accepted for who we are, yada yada. And the episode closes with Mbenga talking to his daughter, and we get a nice fade out shot of the Enterprise leaving the planet. And that's the episode. That's it. That's what happens. I've tried to explain it best I could, because there's a fair amount of problems with it, but I'm not going to focus too much on those problems. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to ask a question. A question I've had to ask myself when I was watching this episode. Is Star Trek Strange New Worlds objectively a good show? See, I've been getting people telling me they think it's great. And if you think it's great, that's absolutely fine. I'm not going to tell you what you should think and what you shouldn't think. You like it, that's absolutely up to you. But I'm beginning to see some serious problems creeping in. Some very new Trek tropes and some Discovery-style problems. Now, of course, no one's bursting into tears every 5 minutes, so that's good. You know, the show's episodic once again, so that's good. The Enterprise beauty shots are quite nice to look at, so that's good. You know, Captain Pike, he's really good. Anson Mount has elevated the show quite a lot. You know, and that's all good. That's all good. That's great. That's wonderful. But here's my real problem. Is this show good because Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard were so bad? I can't judge this show on whether it's any good based on whether or not it's better than Picard or better than Discovery. Because ultimately, you have to look at it objectively. Is this show good? It's not really that good, in my opinion. This is all my opinion, okay? You're watching this video, you want my opinion. Absolutely fine. Here's my brutal, honest opinion. This show isn't that good. It's massively derivative, and I know it's getting increasingly harder to tell original stories, especially in the style of Star Trek. You know, you're always going to have an element of this story and an element of that story, but it's quite blatantly ripped off everything else. There's a lot of acknowledgement that bigotry still exists in the future, even though Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future was one without poverty, without war, without bigotry, without judgments, without anything like that. You know, it was as close to a utopia as you could get. But this show, you can see all the elements starting to creep in now. I still have hope that it will move away from something and not double down on it the next episode. In terms of the story, this episode was pretty poor. It was a standard quarantine outbreak story, which, you know, I think people have probably had enough of at this point, considering what's happened the last 2 years. We don't really want to be watching that sort of stuff. Nothing was particularly well explained in terms of this virus and the effect it had on the crew. There wasn't anything really that stood out for me in this episode, aside from the fact that they like to break their own rules. We're so against genetic modifications. Yet in the first episode, I'm going to mess with your genome. And she says, I'm going to mess with your genome. It's like, hang on a minute. Doesn't that violate all the Starfleet rules and regulations pertaining to genetic modification? La'ar Noonien Singh being confirmed as Khan's ancestor. Okay, did Khan have children, or was she bred in a test tube and you know, artificial womb and all of that? We don't know at this point. We may find out later on, but I'm just thinking, why? What is this new Trek obsession with Khan? Jesus Christ, Khan's been done before. The original Khan was fantastic. The Into Darkness Khan, not so great. You know, the one with Benedict Cumbersnatch or whatever his name is. I joke. I know his name. It's Cumberland Bandersnatch. No, Benedict Cumberbatch. That was terrible. Into Darkness was just a horrific film. And if you disagree with me, that's fine, disagree with me. But I think it was a horrendous film. They've made number one Illyrian. It was ambiguous as to whether she was, you know, as to what species she was in the cage in the original pilot, and she didn't even have a name. She was just known as number one. I think this episode was a little poor. I changed the light to orange because we're steadily decreasing again back to red. But yeah, the show is starting to exhibit some real problems. The writing isn't tight. Some things just happen. for the sake of the plot needing it to happen. Anyway, that's what I thought of Strange New Worlds. Yeah, it's better than Discovery, and it's certainly better than Jean-Luc Picard, the Ballad of Jean-Luc Picard. Yes. Please watch Strange New Worlds because it is definitely better than the show that I am in. And yes, please watch Strange New Worlds because it's only because it's better than the show I was in. Yes, and the show with the crying space Jesus. Yes, it's certainly better. So watch that. It's not enough. It's not enough. You want decent Star Trek, not Star Trek that's just better than the shit Star Trek. My opinion, again. These videos are my opinion. If you don't want to hear my opinion, thanks for stopping by. It's been nice to have you. Anyway, that's all from me. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please remember, if you like this video, then hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. Until next time, look after yourselves, look after one another, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye for now.
I need the silence, stop the violence of the war in my head. Time's the healer, the eraser of all done and said. And as I fall back to my shelter, I know